Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Tsunade takes Naruto out of the village and years later he unlocks Mokuton Bloodline Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Ha ha ha, I think it is time someone taught you a lesson, kid. The leader said cockily before signaling one of his friends to go kill Naruto. His friend nodded before he unsheathed his sword and walked towards Naruto with a smug look on his face. Naruto just continued walking towards the group while the builders and Tsunade had a slightly worried look on their faces. When the thug was about 5 feet away from Naruto, he raised his sword in the air with the intention of slicing the blonde ninja in half. As the sword was descending onto him, Naruto spun on his right leg dodging the sword strike while at the same time he extended his hand with the kunai out and drove it into the side of the man's neck before ripping it out, cleanly severing the man's jugular. Blood gushed out like a fountain from the wound as the man fell face first in a pool of his own blood. The 3 remaining thugs along with everyone else on the bridge had their eyes after seeing how easily Naruto killed the man. "Why, you bastard!" The other 2 thugs yelled as they drew their swords and charged at Naruto in anger, leaving their leader behind. Naruto simply shook the blood off the kunai and continued walking towards the 2 men running towards him. Once again at 5 feet away from Naruto, both men raised their respected swords in the air to cleave him in half, but Naruto pivoted on his right leg and delivered a brutal spinning heel kick to the thug on the right, breaking his neck, killing him. As soon his left leg contacted the ground, the kunai flew from his hand and lodged itself into the side of the other thug's head, killing. Both of them fell face first behind their already dead friend. A kunai was sticking out of one of their heads while the other's head was facing his back. The leader of the group dropped his sword on the ground and fell on his behind when he saw Naruto turn his attention towards him. "Why, you monster!" the man said in fear as he watched Naruto slowly approach him. The arrogant attitude he had earlier was completely gone after watching 3 of his friends effortlessly killed by the boy in front of him. Naruto stopped in front of him and spoke in a chilling voice. "Run," he said lowly in a voice that sent chills down the man's spine. What?" the man stuttered out in confusion. "You had me," Naruto said coldly. "Run," he said. Not need to be told again. The man scrambled to his feet and took off running on the bridge. While he was running away, Naruto created a shadow clone and spoke to it. "Follow him," he ordered as he turned to the clone. "Let him lead you to Gado's base, then kill him," he ordered, causing the clone to nod and take off behind the man. Naruto then created 2 more clones and ordered them to dispose of the 3 dead bodies on the bridge while he went back over to the pile of lumber and sat down, ignoring the stares of all the workers and Tsunade. "He just killed 3 of Gado's men like it was nothing," one of the men working on the bridge whispered to his friend. "He's just a boy yet he kills so easily," another noted. "He is a ninja. What did you expect?" another man replied, getting a nod from those around him. "Maybe there is still hope for our country yet," one man suggested, earning hopeful smiles from everyone around. Naruto heard their conversation but did not have any sort of reaction to it. The rest of the day was uneventful. Naruto spent most of it watching his clones work with Tsunade and his men. He would occasionally do some push-ups and sit-ups to reduce his boredom. The clone he had sent to follow the man had not dispelled as yet. Naruto assumed it must be because it was still scoping out Gado's base. Currently, it was just Tsunade and Naruto's clones working on the bridge. Everyone else had wrapped up for the day except for Tsunade, who wanted to get a bit more work done. The sun had already set, and the stars were lighting up the night sky. "All right, brat, let's go," Tsunade said in his usual gruff tone. Naruto nodded his head and dispelled his clones before the 2 of them began walking down the bridge towards the village. "By the way, thanks for today," the old man said, getting a nod from Naruto. "Just doing my job," Naruto replied with a smile. The two then continued walking in silence until they reached the village. Come on, I need to pick up some things for breakfast tomorrow, Tazuna said to Naruto as they took a detour and walked towards the market. As they walked through the market, Naruto could see there were stairs and whispered in his direction. Apparently, the workers from the bridge had told their families about what happened on the bridge and word seemed to have spread throughout the village. Naruto ignored it for the most part and focused on looking for any possible threats to Tazuna's life. Tazuna walked into a small shop that had mostly empty shelves. The shelves that did have something on them only had a few vegetables and fruits. Naruto was honestly surprised by how bad things were. He didn't expect that people could not even grow enough vegetables to sustain themselves. Sighing to himself, Naruto turned to Tazuna and spoke. Hey, old man, he said, getting the old man's attention. Are there any open spaces or abandoned lots around here? He asked, confusing the old man. There is a small empty lot next door, Tazuna replied with one eyebrow raised in the air. Why? He asked. You'll see, Naruto replied before walking out of the market with Tazuna following behind him. They walked next door and came upon an empty lot with no buildings or structures on it. Naruto then flashed through a few hand seals before he spoke. Wood style. Advent Grove. He said, gaining the attention of everyone around. As the words left Naruto's mouth, the ground began to tremble before multiple fruit trees burst up from inside the empty lot, all bearing large fruits on them. The entire lot was covered in fruit trees tightly packed together inside of the small space. Naruto smiled to himself, seeing one of the techniques he created work perfectly. It was one of the techniques he had developed during his time in the fire capital. Amazing, Tazuna said as he stared at the small grove of fruit trees. Mommy, look, a little girl said while pointing to the trees. He made trees grow, she said while her mother simply stared in awe. People from all around the market rushed over to see the phenomenon that had just taken place. There are fruits on those trees. An old man yelled out in surprise. There should be enough fruits in there for all of you, Naruto said to the group. Enjoy, he said as he motions them to go and eat. People were stumbling over each other in the dark trying to get to the trees, causing Naruto to shake his head and smile. Don't rush, they will still be there in the morning, he said, reassuring them that the trees won't disappear. He then turned to Tazuna only to see the man standing in the spot with a tear running down his face. People have been starving in this village since Gato took control of our country. They had all practically lost hope, Tazuna said as he watching his fellow countrymen smile and dine in happiness. And in a matter of seconds, you not only fed them, but you made them happy and placed some hope back into their lives, he said, causing Naruto to blush slightly in embarrassment. I did what anyone with my abilities would do, he said in a flustered tone. People were suffering and I have the ability to ease their pain. Why would I not use it? He added, causing the old man to chuckle. You are a good kid, he said with a chuckle. Tazuna had very little interaction with Naruto prior to today. Naruto never mingled with the other genin from Kakashi's team, he always kept to himself. After seeing him kill Gato's men earlier today, Tazuna had thought the boy was one of those cold ninjas he would often hear about, the ones that rarely ever show any emotions and saw themselves above those weaker than them. But Naruto showed him today that he was a rare soul in the shinobi world, he cared about the little guy. Let's get going, we're going to be late for dinner, he said before the two of them left the villagers and headed home. Arriving in front of his house, Tazuna opened the door and saw everyone was inside already sitting around the table. Dad, you're home, Tsunade said with a relieved look on her face. Yeah, I stayed back to do some extra work on the bridge, then I stopped by the market, Tazuna replied as he took off his shoes. This kid is amazing, he added while pointing to Naruto was walked past him and sat beside his sensei. Thanks to his clones we got way more work done than we would have, he said with a smile as he moved and sat down at the table next to his grandson. You used your clones. Yamato asked while looking at Naruto with one eyebrow raised. I figured the faster we build the bridge, the faster the mission is over, Naruto replied with a shrug. Anything noteworthy happened? Yamato asked, wanting a report on the day's events. Some of Gato's men showed up wanting to kill the old man, he said in a nonchalant tone, causing Tsunade and Sakura to gasp. But I killed them easily, he added with a small wave. You did let that one go, Tsunade said, causing Naruto to nod. I had my clone follow him so he could find out where Gato's base of operation is, Naruto explained, causing his sensei to nod. Well, at least you're all safe, Tsunade said as he gave her father a hug and started to serve dinner. But that isn't even the most amazing part, Tsunade said after taking a sip of his sake. On our way back, the kid made a bunch of fruit trees with fruits on them grow inside the village, he said, surprising everyone at the table. The villagers are all probably still there eating fruits, he said, causing Yamato and everyone else to look at Naruto for an explanation. It's not a big deal, Naruto said with a shrug. I just made some fruit trees grow so the villagers could eat something, he said, causing his sensei to smile at him. Was it wise to reveal your bloodline like that? Kakashi asked, causing Naruto to shrug with an indifferent look on his face. It's not like I've been keeping it a secret since I returned to the village, Naruto replied with a shrug. And regardless of if it was wise or not, I have the ability to ease the suffering of these people, why wouldn't I use it? He asked rhetorically, causing his sensei and Kakashi to smile at him. That was nice, Naruto, Sakura said with a smile, to which Naruto nodded his head before turning to his meal. You can relax tomorrow, Naruto, his sensei said, getting his attention. Kakashi-senpai is back to full strength and his students are finished with their training. So tomorrow they are going to help me protect Tsunade, he said, causing Naruto to nod his head. Sounds good, Naruto replied as he took a bite of his dinner that Tsunade had made. What's the point? The old man's grandson said in a slightly angry tone, getting everyone's attention. What's the point of all this training and all the fuss? He said as he slammed his hands on the table and stared directly at Naruto with tears streaming down his cheeks. Gato has an army and will destroy all of you, he yelled, causing everyone except Naruto to stare at the kid with nothing but pity in their eyes. These cool things you all say, they don't mean anything. No matter what you do, the strong always win and the weak always lose, he said as he continued to stare at Naruto, who was simply eating his food while ignoring the kid. Just looking at you drives me crazy, he said while looking at Naruto, causing the blonde to raise an eyebrow and look up at the kid in confusion. You don't know anything about this country, you're just butting in. None of you here know what it's like to truly suffer, he said, causing Naruto to chuckle darkly before he spoke. You're right, I don't know what it's like to suffer, but neither do, Naruto said, causing the kid to clench his fist and grit his teeth. You call this suffering? Having a mother and grandfather who love and care for you? Naruto asked before pointing to Sasuke. He had his entire clan slaughtered by his older brother before the same older brother tortured him to a point, he ended up in a coma for 3 days, Naruto said before he pointed to Kakashi. He found his father's dead body in his living room and witnessed both of his teammates killed in front of him all before he turned 13, Naruto said before moving over to Yamato. And he was kidnapped as a child and had all sort of things done to him, he finished before turning back to the kid. You think you know what suffering is? I suggest you grow up and stop acting like a brat, he said before he pushed his plate aside and stood up. Your father died protecting the things he loved, you're just a coward, Naruto said before he turned and walked out the door, leaving everyone in silence. Where are you going, Naruto? Sakura asked as she stood up. I'm going to sleep, he replied as he walked out the door. Everyone became silent after Naruto left. Tsunade's grandson Inari clenched his fist and began crying even more before he took off running up the stairs. Inari, his mother called out with a worried look on her face as she watches him run up the stairs. I apologize on behalf of my student, Yamato said with a bow of her head, causing Tsunami to sigh. It's okay, Tsunami said with a sigh. Even though it was harsh, it was what Inari needed to hear, she said before she sat back down at the table. Everyone sat in silence for the rest of the dinner. The next day Naruto got up slightly later than usual. The sun was already up when he woke up and Tazuna had already left for the bridge along with his sensei and Team 7. Naruto was currently walking out of the wooden house he had built on his way to Tazuna's house for breakfast. As he entered the house, he could hear Tsunami and Inari's voices in the kitchen. Making his way through the living room and into the kitchen, he saw Inari sitting at the table while his mother was at the stove. Good morning, Naruto said, getting their attention. Good morning, Naruto, Tsunami replied with a smile. Slept well? She asked, to which Naruto nodded and sat down at the table. I want to apologize for my behavior last night, Naruto said as he sat down and bowed his head slightly. Tsunami stopped cooking and turned to look at the blonde boy. When she saw him sitting there with an apologetic look on his face and his head slightly bowed, she smiled softly. Don't worry about it, Tsunami said as he walked up and placed one of her hands on her son's head. It's my son that should be apologizing, she added while ruffling Inari's hair. The little boy didn't say anything, he simply lowered his head and continued to eat. Tsunami shook her head and walked back over to the stove to get some breakfast for Naruto. She placed some eggs and fish on a plate before taking it over to Naruto. Thank you, Naruto replied with a grateful smile as he saw Tsunami place the plate down in front of him. Naruto then began eating his breakfast with a small smile on his face. After he took a few bites of the delicious breakfast that Tsunami had prepared, he was interrupted from his eating by the sound of knocking coming from the front door. I'll get it, Inari said, pushing off from the table and sprinting towards the door. Naruto's head shot up in a panic, but when he sensed the chakra of those at the door, he relaxed. Their chakra capacity was that of ordinary civilians, which mean they had little to no chakra at all. He figured that it was just some villagers here looking for Tsunami or Tazuna. Ah! Screamed Inari from the front door, causing Naruto to spring to his feet while Tsunami had a dreaded look on her face. You and your mother are coming with us, brat, a man said from the front door. Naruto looked at Tsunami and signaled her to go to Inari while he made his way out to the back door. Once outside, Naruto hopped up into the roof and walked across the house until he was standing directly above the front door. When he looked down, he could see thugs with katanas strapped to their sides standing there. One of them was holding Inari by the scruff of his shirt while the other was looking for Tsunami. Naruto shook his head in disappointment. He had expected Gato to be a bit smarter than this, but now he can see that the man was a fool. Only a fool would send these thugs to kidnap someone in a house protected by shinobis. Leave Inari alone, Tsunami shouted as she ran through the house towards her son. Hee, how nice of you to come to us, one of the thugs said with a crazed smile on his face. Saves us the trouble of looking for you, he added as he placed his hand on the hilt of his katana, getting ready to draw it. It was at that moment that Naruto decided to make his move. He hopped off of the roof and landed between the two thugs, wrapping both of his arms around each of their heads in the process. Sorry I'm late, he said with a smile while choking both men. The hero always likes to make an entrance, he said as he looked down at a weeping Inari who fell on his backside when Naruto grabbed the two men. What that? One of the men screamed out as he struggled to breathe. Who the hell are you? The other asked in a croaked voice as he too struggled to breathe. Naruto wiped the smile from his face and glanced down at the two men in his grasp before speaking in a cold and murderous tone. It doesn't matter who I am, he said, chillingly, sending shivers up the men's spine. You are not going to be alive long enough to remember my name, he added, causing all the color to drain from the two thugs' faces. In that exact moment, their entire lives flashed before their eyes. Every good happy memory along with every bad thing they had done. They had relived all of it in a fraction of a second right before Naruto squeezed and jerked both of his hands upwards, causing a sickening crunch to be heard as the necks of both men broke. Their bodies went limp, causing the blonde to let go, allowing their dead bodies to fall face first on the porch. Inari. Tsunade yelled, ignoring the two dead bodies and rushing over to her son. She immediately dropped to her knees and wrapped him in a tight hug as tears began streaming down her face. "Are you hurt anywhere?" she asked. "No, I'm okay," he replied as he stared up at Naruto in awe. "Nice work, kid," Naruto said as he looked down at the kid and his mother. "You distracted him good enough that they never noticed me on the roof. It allowed me to get the drop on them. You were very brave," he said, trying to cheer the kid up. As he said that, he saw the kid's bottom lip start to quiver right before the little boy burst out in tears. "Darn it," Inari said between sobs. "I promised myself that I wouldn't cry anymore." He chastised himself, casing Naruto to chuckle and ruffle his hair. "It's okay to cry sometime," Naruto said with a smile. "Especially when you're happy," he added, causing Tsunade to smile and nod at her son. Naruto then narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the bridge. "What's wrong, Naruto?" Tsunade asked, seeing the change in the blonde's expression. "I can sense people fighting on the bridge," Naruto replied before he held up a half-rammed seal, causing two wood clones to emerge out from his back. "Stay here and protect these two, I am going to bridge," he ordered before he turned back to Inari and Tsunade. "I guess I can leave you in charge here now, right, Inari?" he asked. "You go it," the little bit replied as he wiped the tears away from his face and smiled. Naruto smiled before disappearing from the spot via the body flicker jutsu. Naruto reappeared in a clearing in the forest before he began running at top speed in the direction of the bridge. At his top speed, it only took about 5 minutes for him to arrive at the head of the bridge. When he got there, he could barely see the bridge. A thick mist had covered the entire area. "There is a lot of chakras in the mist," he noted to himself. "The hidden mist jutsu," he thought with a nod. He stood there for a few minutes thinking up a plan and evaluating every advantage and disadvantage that would occur as a result of his actions. After thinking everything through, he decided to act. "Wood clone jutsu," he said under his breath, causing 5 wood clones to emerge out from his back. The 5 clones then all lined out beside Naruto, equally spaced before them, along with Naruto began flashing through hand seals, ending with the snake hand seal. "Wind style. Great breakthrough," they all shouted before blowing out a devastating gust of wind from their mouths, clearing all of the mist in the surrounding area along with knocking a few people on the bridge off their feet. Naruto quickly dispelled the wood clones and began walking towards the bridge. "Quite the party you all seem to be having," he said loudly while walking with a wide smile on his face as though he was not worried about anything. "Why didn't anyone invite me?" he asked in a carefree tone. While he had a carefree expression on his face, he was observing everything around him carefully. Sakura and Tazuna were the closest to him. Both of them were knocked off their feet by his wind jutsu and were in the process of picking themselves up. On the far side of the bridge, Naruto to clearly see was some sort of dome made up of ice mirrors. A bloodline user, Naruto thought to himself as he observed the dome. Peering further into the dome, he could see a badly wounded Sasuke and Sai fighting a masked shinobi who seemed to be inside of one of the mirrors. How interesting, he thought. Standing in the middle of the two groups was his sensei, Kakashi, and a masked shinobi wielding a rather large sword. He must be Zabuza Momochi, Naruto noted in his head. The trio seemed unaffected by Naruto's wind but still looked like they had been fighting for a while now. "Naruto!" Sakura yelled out, knocking the blonde out of his thought. "Thank goodness you're here," she said with a grateful tone, causing the blonde to smile at her slightly. "Just how many of you leaf brats are there?" Zabuza asked in an annoyed tone. He was clearly annoyed at the fact that there was now one more kid for him to deal with. "You'll never know," Naruto replied with a grin, clearly unbothered by the Jonin. Nice work getting rid of the mist, Naruto, Yamato said, complimenting his student. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have shown up here if it wasn't for two of Gato's guys showing up at the house to kidnap Inari and Tsunami, Naruto said, nonchalantly, causing Tsunade to go into a panic. Are my daughter and grandson okay? He asked with a dreaded look on his face as if he was expecting the worst. Yeah, they're fine, he replied in a casual tone. I took care of those guys easily and left a couple of my cones behind to keep them safe, he added. Oh, thank God, Tsunade said as he let out a sigh of relief. Naruto nodded his head before creating two seal-less shadow clones. You two stay here and help guard Tsunade, Naruto said, causing the two clones to nod their heads before moving to stand on either side of the bridge builder while Sakura stood in the front. Naruto then began walking towards the ice dome to help Sasuke and Sai. I'll go help the kids, he said to his sensei and Kakashi. You don't think I am just going to allow you to walk by me, do you? Zabuza asked as he raised his sword in the air ready to cleave Naruto in two. The blonde just continued walking as if he was completely unbothered by the former hidden Miss Jonin's words. Just as Zabuza was about to bring the sword down onto Naruto, he was forced to dodge to the right in order to avoid being hit by multiple wooden beams, compliments of Yamato. Keep your hands off my student, Yamato said with a growl as his entire right hand tuned into multiple wooden beams trying to stab Zabuza. The swordsman landed back on the bridge and held his sword up beside him, causing all of the wooden beams to slam into the flat side of the blade instead of him. He was, however, forced to dodge once more thanks to Kakashi joining in the fight. Turning his attention away from the three Jonins, Naruto continued walking to the ice dome. As he got closer to the Dome of Mirrors, he could better see the condition of both Sasuke and Sai along with getting a better idea of the masked shinobi's abilities and fighting style. Both Sasuke and Sai were covered in Senbon needles and bleeding a lot. They were not bleeding that fast due majority of the Senbon needles still being stuck inside of them, but it was still a lot of blood. This shinobi is pretty skilled, Naruto observed as he looked around at the two wounded leaf shinobis. Senbons take precision and skill to use, but are not exactly deadly weapons, he thought to himself. All vital organs were missed, which means they have a very good understanding of anatomy. This could mean one of two things. Either they do not want to kill Sasuke and Sai, or they are purposely dragging this out to make it a slow and painful death, Naruto hypothesized inside his head. They are obviously much more skilled than the two of them and could kill these two at any time but chooses not to do so. How cruel, he added with a shake of his head before stopping directly in front of the dome, standing perfectly in between toe mirrors allowing him to peer inside. You two, okay? He asked as he looked down at the two wounded leaf shinobi. Sai nodded his head slightly while Sasuke, who was on all fours breathing heavily, glared up at Naruto with two piercing red eyes, with one tomo in his right eye and two in his left, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in surprise. He awakened his Sharingan, Naruto thought to him as he stared at the Uchiha. We don't need your help, Sasuke said as he continued to glare at Naruto. It had already hurt his pride that the masked shinobi, who appeared to be around the same age as both him and Sai, had bested them in combat. The last thing his pride needed was for someone else who was his age to show him up, especially a Senju. Well, that's too bad, Naruto replied before spreading both of his arms out wide and channeled chakra into both of his palms. It is useless, the masked shinobi said for the first time since Naruto's arrival. My mirrors are indestructible, they said, causing Naruto to chuckle. He then slammed both of his palms on the two mirrors on either side of him, releasing the build-up chakra at the exact moment of impact, causing both ice mirrors to shatter like glass. Everyone's eyes went wide as dinner plates at what they just saw. Sasuke and Sai had tried on multiple occasions to destroy the mirrors, they had even tried to melt them with fire jutsus, but they couldn't even put a dent into them. Yet here came Naruto, who simply slapped the two mirrors and shattered them like they were glass. You were saying, Naruto asked mockingly with a smirk on his face before he stepped into the dome and grabbed both Sasuke and Sai and threw them outside. He then made a sealess shadow clone and gave it orders. Take those two back to Sakura and heal their wounds, he ordered. You got it, boss. The clone said before walking out of the dome and picking both Sai and Sasuke up, much to the annoyance of the Uchiha, and teleporting back towards Sakura and Tsunade via the body flicker technique. Now, where were we? Naruto said as he turned his attention to the masked shinobi in the ice mirror directly in front of him. You will have to forgive me, but in order for Master Zabuza to achieve his goals I must kill you, the masked shinobi said as he held up 3 Senbon needles in his right hand. It is nothing personal against you, he added, causing Naruto to nod his head in understanding. We are shinobis, so I understand, he replied in a casual tone. But you won't be killing me, he added as he placed his hands in his pockets. That may have been true had you stayed on the outside, the shinobi said before he began jumping from mirror to mirror at blinding speed. But you made the fatal mistake of entering my domain. In here, I am unmatched, he said while jumping from mirrors to mirrors, getting ready to launch his attacks at Naruto. I have to admit, you are quite fast, Naruto said calmly. But compared to my grandmother and big sister, he said before rotating on his left heel while extending his right leg straight out. Timing his rotation perfectly, Naruto delivered a brutal spinning heel kick to the masked shinobi's midsection, knocking all the air out of him. You're pretty slow, he said coldly before retracting his leg, causing the shinobi to fall face first onto the bridge, shattering his mask, revealing a pretty feminine-looking boy. He laid on the bridge gasping for air as much as he could, but the hit was so devastating that it made it incredibly hard for him to inhale. Haku! Shouted a very alarmed Zabuza, causing Naruto to turn his head slightly and look behind him. When he turned around, he saw Zabuza staring at the laboring boy, who Naruto now knows is named Haku. Zabuza had a shocked expression on his face. It was quite clear that he did not expect the boy to lose. Due to his sudden shift in attention, however, it provided the right distraction that Yamato needed to capture the missing ninja with his wood jutsu. Wood style. Great forest technique. Yamato yelled out from the right of Zabuza while pointing his right hand towards him. Suddenly Yamato's entire right arm transformed into multiple wooden beams which raced towards Zabuza and bounded each of his arms and legs. What the? Zabuza yelled out in surprise as the wooden beams captured him and held him up a few inches in the air. Even though he was captured, however, he never let go of his sword. You let yourself get distracted too easily, Yamato said as he held Zabuza in place, causing the missing ninja to grit his teeth in frustration. Soon everyone on the bridge heard the sound of a flock of birds chirping. Looking past Zabuza, Naruto saw Kakashi standing there with his Sharingan uncovered while holding his right hand with his left while his right palm was covered in lightning. This is the end of the line for you, Zabuza, Kakashi said in a cold tone as he narrowed his eyes at Zabuza. He then began rushing towards Zabuza with his right hand stretched back ready to stab it into the swordsman. Everyone watched as the masked leaf shinobi got closer and closer to Zabuza, expecting the leaf shinobi to end the missing ninja's life. When Kakashi was about 5 feet away from Zabuza, Naruto saw something blur past him heading towards Zabuza, causing his eyes to widen in shock as he realized what it was that rushed past him. Watch out! Naruto yelled as he zoned in on the blur to see a wounded Haku rushing towards her master. Chidori! Kakashi yelled as he stepped his lightning-covered palm in the direction of Zabuza's chest. When he was about 2 feet away, the previously masked shinobi appeared in front of Zabuza with a gentle smile on his face, causing Kakashi's eyes to widen in shock. It was already too late for him to stop his attack. Everyone could only watch as Kakashi stabbed his hand through the chest of the young who sacrificed himself for Zabuza. This will be my final act for you, Master Zabuza, Haku said as he coughed up blood before reaching out and grabbing a hold on Kakashi's arm, preventing him from moving. Ha ha ha, I truly did raise the perfect tool. Zabuza said gleefully. In a great show of strength, he then broke free his arm which was holding his sword, causing everyone's eyes to widen in horror. He then raised his arm in the air, preparing to cut Kakashi in half. As he was about to bring the sword down, everyone had one common thought in their heads. He's going to slice right through the boy, they all thought. As the sword was coming down towards Kakashi, Zabuza suddenly froze and coughed up a large amount of blood. Slowly looking down towards his chest, he saw a wooden spike sticking out of where his heart is. Turning his head slowly to where he knew Yamato was, he saw the wood user was still standing there holding him in position with his wooden beams. With Yamato still standing where Zabuza remembered, he was extremely confused as to who was stabbing him. I never got a chance to introduce myself, came the voice of Naruto from behind Zabuza, causing the masked swordsman to turn his head backward in order to get a good look. When he turned around, he saw the blonde-haired shinobi standing behind him with his right arm transformed into a wooden spike stabbing through his heart. My name is Naruto Senju, he said lowly. Zabuza turned back around and let go of his sword before he looked up to the sky and chuckled. A Senju wielding the wood release, he said with a chuckle as he looked down and saw Kakashi pulled his hand out of Haku's lifeless body and laid him gently on the ground. The shinobi world is going to be a lot more interesting from now on, he said while staring at his fallen comrade. It is shame we won't be around to see it, Haku, he said grimly before coughing up some more blood. Naruto, sensing that the swords will to fight was gone and the fact that the man was on death's door, Naruto pulled his arm out of Zabuza's chest. Place me beside Haku, kid, Zabuza said, to which Naruto obliged as his sensei cancelled his wood jutsu holding Zabuza. Laying the man next to his comrade, Kakashi and everyone else came and stood around the two. You were a lot more than just a tool, Haku, Zabuza said as he reached out to touch the dead boy's face before breathing his last breath. Everyone just stood around and stared at the two dead bodies of Zabuza and Haku. They're dead, Sakura said in a slightly horrified voice. It was quite clear to Naruto that this was the first time she had faced death or had seen someone's life been taken in front of her. It was much like him on his first C-rank mission. Welcome to the life of a shinobi, Naruto said as he let out a sigh and looked around the bridge. The dome previously made of ice mirrors had all shattered the moment Haku died, leaving behind only puddles of water in the location where they once stood. Parts of the bridge were destroyed thanks to Yamato's wood release and Zabuza's sword. Tsunade is going to have his work cut out for him, Naruto thought as he looked around at the damage. Thank God it's finally over, Tsunade said as he let out a sigh of relief. We're not done yet, Naruto suddenly said as he stared at the unfinished side of the bridge. We got company, he added, causing everyone to put their guards up. Well, came the arrogant voice of a man standing on the unfinished side of the bridge with a large number of thugs walking up beside him. So, this is how it turns out, huh? The man asked rhetorically as more and more thugs climb up the wooden staircase made by the bridge workers to get down to the river. Gato, Tsunade shouted out as he recognized the man speaking. Gato was a short man with brown shaggy hair and wore a black suit. In Naruto's opinion, the man didn't look like much. I suppose I should be thanking you Leaf Ninjas for killing Zabuza, Gato said with a dark chuckle. Saves me the trouble of doing it myself, he added with another chuckle which caused the thug behind him to laugh as well. Kill Zabuza? Sakura asked in confusion. I thought he was working for you, she asked, clearly not understanding what was going on. Zabuza was too expensive, Gato explained with an arrogant smirk on his face. He needed to be cut from the payroll, he said before chuckling to himself once again. The demon of mist. What a joke, Gato mocked while staring at the two corpses on the bridge. He couldn't even take care of one stinking bridge builder, he added before looking at Tsunade with a devious smirk on his face. But you die here today on this bridge of yours, Tsunade, he said, causing a shiver to travel up the old man's spine. So much for finally getting some rest, Kakashi said as he let out a tired sigh. Why don't you two relax? Naruto said as he looked at the two Jonin senseis. I'll handle it, he said before turning towards Gato and the group of thugs. Are you sure? Yamato asked while looking at his student. Yeah, I barely broke a sweat fighting that Haku guy, so I'm good to go, he said as he cracked his neck before he began walking towards the group of men. Seeing the young shinobi walking towards them, Gato and the thugs let you a chorus of laughter. This brat thinks he can take on all of us by himself. One of the thugs yelled out while laughing. We are going to kill you, then your little friends, and then the old man. Another yelled out, causing Naruto to shake his head. You are all more than welcome to try, Naruto said with a smirk on his face, causing an angry look to appear on the faces of Gato and his thugs. Kill the brat and then kill the old man, Gato ordered, causing the group of thugs to rush towards Naruto, who continued to walk at a casual pace. Stopping some distance away from the group of thugs, Naruto began flashing through hand signs at blinding speed. Wood style. Multiple wood spike jutsu. Naruto yelled out before slamming both of his palms on the ground. As his palm contacted the ground, a small tremor shook the bridge, causing all of the thugs to stop their running and looking around to see what was going on. After about 1 second of shaking, the ground beneath each of the thugs burst open with large tree roots shooting out, impaling each one of Gato's men through the midsection and lifted them up 5 feet in the air. Ah! They all screamed while hanging from the tree roots. Naruto then stood up and looked out in front of him at the scene of about 50 thugs hanging 5 feet in the air with a large bloody tree root sticking out of their midsection. The scene made him cringe slightly due to him still being new to the whole killing thing. When he killed Zabuza and those goons on the bridge yesterday, it did not affect him that much, but seeing a large number of people that he just killed in an instant, stirred him slightly. He just killed all of them, Sakura said as he brought her hands up to her mouth in shock. Even though he is still a kid, he has the power to kill all those people, Tazuna said in surprise. Guess it is true what they say about shinobis, you can't judge them based on appearance alone, he added. You okay there, Naruto? Yamato asked as he saw his student slightly frozen in place. Why yeah, I'm fine, Naruto replied in a less cheerful tone before shaking his head to come out of his stupor. He then raised his right leg up in the air and slammed his back down on the bridge, causing another tremor, which was followed by all of the tree roots retracting themselves back into the ground, leaving the numerous dead bodies of thugs on the bridge laying in a pool of their own blood. Looking past all of the corpses, everyone on the bridge could see that there was one survivor of the massacre, Gato. The short man was white as a sheet, staring at the corpses of his men. I am possible, Gato whispered out in a horrified voice. This can't be true. He screamed like a man who had gone crazy. Naruto then slowly started walking towards him with a cold look on his face. No, stay away, Gato screamed as he took a few steps back. Naruto then flared his chakra and released his killing intent before he spoke. Don't move, he said in a chilling tone that froze Gato in place. As Naruto got closer and closer to him, the more he found it harder to breathe. Everything in his body was telling him to run and jump off the side of the bridge and kill himself, but no matter how hard he tried, his feet would not move. When Naruto reached him, he stood towering over the man, looking down at him with a cold look in his eyes. Please don't kill me, Gato begged as tears started streaming down his face, causing Naruto to chuckle. He was about to say something to the short man, but before he could, the voice of Inari interrupted him. Gato, Inari shouted, getting everyone's attention. Your days of ruling over this land is over, he shouted while holding a crossbow in his arms and a mob of villagers all carrying weapons behind him. Yeah, we've had enough of your tyranny, a man yelled. We are taking back our country, a woman yelled. Yeah, came the chorus of the rest of the villagers. You guys, Tazuna said with tears in his eyes. Sorry, we're late, big bro Naruto, Inari shouted, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. But the hero always likes to make a cool entrance. The kid said with a grin, causing Naruto's eyebrow to twitch slightly after hearing the kid using the same words he used when he rescued him and his mother. Damn, brat, Naruto muttered under his breath before turning back to Gato, who was still rooted in position. Naruto walked behind him and grabbed him the back of the neck before looking up at his sensei and Kakashi. I'll be back, he has something I want, Naruto said while looking at the two Jonins, causing them to raise an eyebrow in confusion. What are you up to, Naruto? Yamato asked, causing Naruto to grin mischievously at him. You'll see when I get back, he said with a grin before disappearing in a swirl of leaves with Gato in tow. Where is he going with Gato? One of the villagers screamed, asked, thirsty for vengeance. He'll be back with Gato, Yamato said to villagers, trying to calm them down. I'm sure you will all get what you are after, Kakashi said before turning to the numerous corpses on the bridge. But for now, I think we should get rid of all these bodies, he said with a sigh before turning to Yamato. I'll leave it to you, Yamato, he said with a one-eyed smile, causing his fellow Jonin to groan. Everyone, that boy killed all of Gato's men and freed this country, Tsunade said to the villagers. I think he has earned some of our trust, he added, causing a lot of people in the crowd to nod in agreement. Gato's mansion. Naruto and Gato arrived in a swirl of leaves in front of Gato's mansion in the middle of the forest. Upon arrival, Naruto shoved him forward in the direction of the mansion, causing him to fall down. Where are we? Gato asked as he looked around, trying to get his bearings. Upon seeing his house, his eyes widened in shock at the fact that the blonde shinobi knew where he lived and could have killed him at any time. Start walking, Naruto commanded before giving him another push. The two of them then started walking to the entrance of the mansion. Naruto was surprised that there were no guards here guarding the place. It would appear that Gato took everyone to the bridge in order to kill Zabuza. What do you want? Gato asked in a scared voice. If you give me what I want, then I won't kill you, Naruto said, using the short man to brighten up slightly. Do I have your word that you won't kill me? Gato asked in a suspicious voice. Yes, you have my word, Naruto said with a smirk, causing the man to become relieved slightly. The two of them walked into the mansion and headed straight for Gato's office, where Naruto finally told Gato what he wanted. So, what do you want? Gato asked while looking at the blonde, causing him to smirk mischievously. You are going to sign over your company and everything you own over to me, Naruto said, causing man's eyes to widen in horror. Why, you can't be serious, he stuttered out, causing Naruto to chuckle. I am, Naruto replied calmly. But of course, if you wish to sign over your life instead, I could oblige, he added with a smile as he took out a kunai from his pouch and spun it around his finger. Upon seeing the kunai, the images of all the dead bodies on the bridge flashed before his eyes, causing him to go ghastly white. Fine, fine, Gato said as he walked to the corner of his office and opened a safe. I do it, he said before taking out a file with a bunch of documents. For the next 15 minutes, the two of them signed all of the necessary papers that were required for Gato to relinquish control and ownership of his company and all of his assets over to Naruto. Conveniently, Gato also had the papers necessary to change the name of the company, which Naruto filled out immediately. Naruto then created a dozen shadow clones and had them search the house for anything of value and take them. When it was all said and done, in a matter of minutes, one of the richest men in the entire elemental nations was now the poorest man in the entire elemental nations. There, all done, Gato said as he handed the last document over to Naruto. The blonde inspected it and nodded before storing everything away in a storage scroll along with everything his clones had gathered to go through at a later date. Well then, Naruto said as he stood up. We should get going, he added, confusing Gato. Before the man could react, Naruto grabbed him and teleported out of the house with the body flicker technique. Back on the bridge, everyone was still on the bridge waiting, or in the case of Kakashi and Yamato, resting. Yamato had used some water jutsus to push all the corpses off the bridge and into the river down below. Team 7 was also resting, or more specifically Sasuke and Sai were resting while Sakura was bothering Sasuke. Speaking of the Uchiha, he was sitting on the side of the bridge staring at the multiple holes in the ground left behind by Naruto's technique. There was an obvious look of jealousy on his face. How is he so powerful? Sasuke asked himself as he stared at the holes. He was accustomed to being the top genin in his class. He was the one everyone wanted to beat, but on his first mission outside the village, he came across two people who were around the same age as him and were much more powerful than him. What have I been doing all these years? He screamed in his head. I have to get stronger. He thought with conviction written all over his face. Kakashi and Yamato, who was sitting across from the genin, saw the look on his face and smiled slightly. Seems like he found some inspiration, Yamato said, causing Kakashi to chuckle and nod. It was at that moment that Naruto arrived back on the bridge with Gato in tow. Similar to when they arrived in front of the mansion, Naruto shoved him forward, causing him to fall down. Upon seeing the arrival of Naruto and Gato, everyone swarmed towards them. Seeing the villagers coming towards them, Naruto smiled and grabbed Gato by the back of his neck and shoved him in the direction of the villagers before he spoke. He is all yours, Naruto said with a smile, causing the short businessman to look between Naruto and the villagers with a horrified look on his face. You said you wouldn't kill me if I gave you what you wanted. Gato screamed as one of the men from the village grabbed him. You gave me your word. He yelled as the villagers surrounded him. I did, Naruto replied while walking over to his sensei. I said that I wouldn't kill you, and as you can see, I am not the one who is going to be killing you, the blonde said with a smirk before pointing to the villagers surrounding Gato. They are, he added with a chuckle as the villagers began beating Gato. So, what did you want from Gato? Yamato asked as Naruto stood beside him and Kakashi. Naruto smiled at the two of them before he spoke. Gato transports is now Senju Enterprise, Naruto said, surprising the two men. You made him sign over his company to you? Kakashi asked with his eyebrow raised. Not just his company, everything he owned, Naruto said, causing Kakashi to chuckle and shake his head. Wouldn't that causing some problems when we get back to the village? Yamato asked, causing Naruto to shake his head. No, this falls under clan affairs, he said with a smile. So, it shouldn't cause any issues, he said as the screams from Gato finally died down in the background. If anything, this will benefit the village by increasing trade, he added, causing the two men to nod in understanding. As the trio finished talking, Tsunade, Inari and Tsunade walked up to them with smiles on their faces. Big bro, Inari called out, getting their attention. We took down Gato, he said with a wide smile on his face, causing the three shinobi to smile. We don't know how we can ever thank all of you for what you have done, Tsunade said with tears streaming down her face. This country will be forever indebted to you all, Tsunade said while his grandson and daughter nodded. Hey, don't go getting all mushy on me, old man, Naruto said, causing Tsunade's eyebrow to twitch slightly. Gato is dead from the looks of it, he said as he looked over the old man's shoulder at the villagers dancing around the beaten and mangled corpse of Gato. Shouldn't you all be celebrating or something, he added. That might be the best thing I have ever heard you say, brat. Tsunade said with a smile before turning to the villagers. Everyone, we are free, he yelled out, causing everyone to cheer. Let's have a party to not only celebrate our renewed freedom but also the bright future of our country. He shouted, causing everyone to shout and cheer in agreement before they all began rushing back to the village to start the celebration while dragging Gato's corpse with them. With Gato gone, the bridge should be built in no time, Kakashi said as he let out a relieved sigh. Hopefully we can get some peaceful days from here on out, Naruto said, earning nods from the two Jonins. It has been 1 month since the battle on the bridge. The bridge was finally complete, and the land of waves was now connected to the land of fire. Even though it took 1 month, Tsunade had finished the bridge ahead of schedule thanks to Naruto's clones and the villagers not being scared of Gato anymore. In the past month, a lot has happened to the Land of Waves and its people thanks to the shinobis of the Leaf Village. Naruto and his sensei had used their wood release to help rebuild the houses in the village. In some cases, they completely broke down some houses and rebuilt them new. Naruto made more fruit-bearing trees grow in the surrounding area to provide some food for the people along with help some of the men fish and hunt for meat. He had also handed all the money he took from Gato's mansion along with some of the valuable items he gathered over to the villagers so they can rebuild their lives. The lives of the people in the Land of Waves were starting to return to the way it was before Gato showed up, and in their eyes, it was all thanks to Naruto. Naruto was probably the busiest person in the entire Wave country over the past month. When he was not helping the villagers rebuild their lives, he was busy getting Senju Enterprise underway. He had originally planned to ask Tsunade to oversee things for him here in the Wave country, but the old man refused, claiming he has no expertise in the business. He instead pointed Naruto in the direction of his daughter, who apparently is a natural when it comes to business affairs. Apparently, Tsunade is the one who manages the finances for Tsunade's construction business while the old man simply builds stuff. It took some convincing, but Naruto managed to get to agree to work for him after he told her that the Land of Waves would get 30% of the profit from transactions done there. In the past month, Naruto and Tsunade had gone through all of Gato's documents and records in order to figure out where all of his hubs were for trading and who his suppliers were. The first thing they did was send out messages to all the hubs that the company was now under new ownership. They made it clear to all the hubs that employees previously employed by Gato were welcome to stay on so long as they accepted to work for the new owner. Those that do not wish to recognize the change in ownership should consider themselves unemployed. Gato had shipping hubs in a lot of minor countries and hidden villages, along with having hubs in both the village hidden in the mist and the village hidden in the clouds. The majority of the hubs and suppliers responded back to Naruto and Tsunade agreeing to stay on, while the hub in the cloud village and a few other minor countries did not respond. Naruto told Tsunade to cast them aside and consider them not part of the company. The second thing they did was cut ties with a few suppliers who supplied Gato with his illegal goods like drugs. After a few weeks of getting everyone in line, Senju Enterprises began operations, much to Naruto's delight. Currently, Naruto and his sensei along with Team 7 back on the soils of the Land of Fire in front of the entrance of the now completed bridge. There was a large crowd in front of them. All the villagers had come to see them off and to thank them once more. Tsunade and his family were all standing in the front of the crowd smiling at the group of leaf shinobis. "We could have never finished the bridge with you," Tsunade said with a grateful smile on his face. "You all have gone above and beyond for us. Words cannot express how profoundly grateful we are to you all," he said, while his daughter and the villagers behind him all nod their heads in agreement. "Do be careful," Tsunade said with a warm smile on her face while holding a clipboard with some papers in her hands. "Thank you for your kind hospitality this past month," Kakashi said with a one-eyed smile. "Think nothing of it," Tsunade said while waving his hands. "You all are always welcome here anytime you wish," he added with a smile, causing a few of the villagers to shout in agreement. Now, don't go getting all mushy on us," Naruto said with a warm smile. "We'll come to visit again," he added. "You promise you will?" Inari said as he began to cry slightly, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at him. Shaking his head slightly, Naruto walked up and bopped the little body on his head with his fist. "I have a business to run here. Of course, I'm coming back," Naruto as he hit the boy on the head. "Ow, you big meanie," Inari yelled as tears streamed out of his eyes, causing everyone to chuckle. Naruto shook his head before he turned to the Tsunade and spoke. "Take care of things here," he said with a smile. "I'll be in touch regularly," he added, causing her to smile and nod. "You got it, boss," he said, causing him to chuckle before turning to the old man. Try not to be a pain in the for Tsunade and the rest of the village, Naruto said in a teasing tone, causing Tsunade's eyebrow to twitch while the villagers burst out laughing. Why, you damn brat, Tsunade yelled while shaking his fist in the air. Naruto, time to hit the road, Yamato called out from behind Naruto, causing the blonde to nod his head before waving goodbye to everyone. The group of leaf shinobis then began walking away from the bridge and villagers. It is all thanks to that boy that we were able to finish the bridge, Tsunade said as they all watched the group walking away. It is thanks to him the wave country is back to its former glory, he added with a proud look on his face. And with his company being here, the country to prosper even more than it did before, Tsunade added, causing everyone to nod. With this bride in his company, the land of Wave has an incredibly bright future, she added with a smile. Speaking of the bridge, what are you going to name it now that it is completed, Tsunade? One of the villagers asked. Tsunade did not even take a second to think about it before he responded. The Great Naruto Bridge, he proclaimed proudly as he stared at the fading images of the group walking away. That's a wonderful name, Tsunade said while the others shouted a chorus of agreement. With Naruto, the group of shinobis was currently walking through the forest of the Land of Fire on their way back to the Leaf Village. Kakashi and Yamato were at the rear of the group watching all of their students, while Sasuke and Sakura were at the front of the pack, leaving Naruto and Sai in the middle. From the moment they left the bridge, Sakura began pestering Sasuke about going on a date with her, much to the annoyance of the Uchiha and everyone else in the group. Naruto honestly did not understand why the girl was so obsessed with the Uchiha. The boy clearly had no interest in her, yet she continues to pursue him. Not wanting to listen to the pink-haired girl making a fool of herself, he decided to turn to the two Jonin senseis behind them and ask a question. Can we pick up the pace, sensei? He asked as he looked back with a pleading expression on his face. Getting the general idea as to why the blonde wanted to pick up the pace, the two Jonin chuckled together before Kakashi spoke. What's wrong, Naruto? The one-eyed Jonin asked in a teasing manner. Not enjoying the peaceful atmosphere? He asked, causing Yamato to chuckle. There is nothing peaceful about this atmosphere, Naruto replied with a groan, causing the two Jonins to chuckle. Alright then, let's pick it up, Kakashi said loudly to get everyone's attention. The two Jonins and four Genins then jumped up onto the trees of the forest and began tree hopping towards the village at a decent pace. They could not push as much as Naruto would have liked due to the other Genins not being able to keep up. Next day asterisk. It took the group an entire day to reach the Leaf Village, having to stop and take breaks periodically because of Sasuke and Sakura. Sasuke had done a better job keeping up, but Sakura seriously lacked stamina. Seeing that the girl would have collapsed if they chose to keep going through the night, Kakashi and Yamato decided that they should stop and rest for the night before resuming their journey at sunrise. That is exactly what they did, and now they were all standing in front of the village gates. Home sweet home, Naruto said with a grin on his face as he stared through the gates and into the village. The group then began making their way to the guard station at the gates to check in. Team 7 and 11 returning from C-rank missions, Kakashi said as he arrived at the two Chunins assigned at the guard station. Ah, Kakashi and Yamato, one of the guards said. Welcome back, they greeted as they make a note of their return in the logs. Hey Izumo, hey Katetsu, Naruto greeted with a smile, causing the two Chunins to smile at him. Naruto. The duo shouted happily, getting the attention of a few villagers and causing Naruto to chuckle. Anything interesting happened while we were away? He asked, causing the two guards to shake their heads. No, it's been pretty boring, Izumo said in a bored tone as he slouched forward. A few of the villagers were complaining that you weren't around as much, Katetsu said while Izumo nodded. Apparently Team 11 was greatly missed by the villagers, Izumo added, causing a look of jealousy to appear on the faces of Sasuke and Sakura, while Sai just had a creepy smile on his face. Naruto chuckled slightly with a bashful look on his face, causing his sensei to take on an amused look while looking at his student. By the way, Kakashi, Kotetsu said in a serious voice while looking at the silver-haired Jonin. Lord Hokage said to report to him as soon as your teams returned, he informed, causing the join to nod before turning to the two teams. Let's go report to the Hokage, he said, earning a nod from all of the Genins. The group then began walking through the village on their way to the Hokage's office. As they walked through the village, villagers would stop and greet Sasuke and Naruto with warm smiles on their faces. Sasuke would just ignore all of them while he kept a cold look on his face. Naruto, on the other hand, smiled warmly with every villager that greeted him while kindly greeting a few of them back. As the teams reached the door to the Hokage's office, Kakashi stepped forward and knocked before waiting a few seconds. Enter. A familiar voice commanded, causing the join to open the door, and the two teams walked into the room to find the age-old Hokage sitting behind his desk smoking his pipe with two large piles of papers on either side of his desk. Team 7 and Team 11 reporting back from their C-rank missions, Kakashi said as he and Yamato stood forward while Naruto then the other Genin stood behind them. Welcome back, the third Hokage said warmly as stared at the group with a relieved look on his face as he saw that they had all returned unharmed before a stern look appeared on his face as he turned his attention to Kakashi. Yamato, why don't you report on your mission first? He added, never taking his eyes off the silver-haired Jonin, letting everyone know that the Hokage was not too pleased with Kakashi at the moment. Right, Yamato said before he began giving the details of his and Naruto's mission to eliminate the bandits near Tanzaku quarters. The Hokage and Team 7 were incredibly impressed with Naruto and his sensei after hearing the mission report. The Hokage was even more impressed with the way Naruto conducted himself on the mission, not freezing up after his first kill. Most shinobi would need a few minutes to gather themselves after conducting the act, but he was pleased to hear Naruto concluded the mission and then he dealt with his emotions afterward. Overall, the Hokage was extremely pleased. Great job, you two, the Hokage complimented, causing Naruto to smile. We also received reports from Tanzaku quarters of travelers no longer being harassed by bandits, so job well done, he said with a smile before reaching into his desk and pull out two storage scrolls and handed them to Yamato and Naruto. Here is your payment for the mission, he said as Naruto and Yamato stepped forwards and called their respected scrolls. Thank you, Lord Hokage, the two said simultaneously with a bow as they accepted the scrolls, causing the old man to smile at them before he turned to Kakashi with a serious look on his face. Now you, Kakashi, the third Hokage commanded, raising his voice slightly. Kakashi chuckled nervously before he began to recount the details of their mission, starting with their encounter with the Demon Brothers and his first fight with Zabuza to the battle on the bridge. To say that the third Hokage was surprised to hear Naruto was one to deal the final blow to Zabuza would be an understatement. However, when he found out Naruto killed about 50 thugs that worked for Gato in an instant, he was even more shocked. As shocked as he was, however, he was equally impressed. Kakashi then detailed the aftermath of the fight and the rebuilding of the Wave Country. It made the Hokage smile when he heard of Yamato and Naruto's efforts to help the people of the Wave Country. The kindness that Naruto showed reminded the third Hokage of his sensei, the first Hokage. He is a lot like you, Lord Hashirama, the old man thought with a fond smile on his face as he took a puff of his pipe. That was some excellent work from you all, he said as he looked at the newly minted genin. This mission will go down in the official records as an A-rank mission, however, you all will only receive a C-rank mission payment due to the client only paying for such, he informed, causing everyone to nod their heads in understanding. I believe both teams earned some time off to relax, he added, causing everyone to smile. Team 7, you will get all of today and tomorrow off, while Team 11 will get all of today and the next 2 days off due to you completing back-to-back missions, the Hokage said, causing everyone to nod their heads once again. Thank you, Lord Third. the genin all said with a bow, causing the old man to chuckle. Okay. All of you are dismissed, he said as he waved them off. Except you, Kakashi, he added sternly as the Jonin was about to leave. Yamato and all of the genin then exited the Hokage's office. As the doors closed behind them, they could hear the Hokage yelling at Kakashi. Shaking his head at the plight his friend was in, he turned his student and spoke as Team 7 went their separate ways. We'll meet at our regular training ground after 2 days at 6 a.m. sharp, he commanded, causing Naruto to nod in understanding. Enjoy your days off, he said before holding up a half-ram seal and disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto then held up a half-ram seal of his own and disappeared from the Hokage's building in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves. He reappeared in front of the gates of the Senju compound in a similar fashion to which he disappeared. Unlocking the security seal on the gate, he walked into the compound to see it was just the way he left it. Locking the gates behind him, he made his way to the main house and packed away his stuff. He placed his dirty clothes in the laundry basket before he made his way to the kitchen to see what he had to eat. Opening the fridge, he saw that a lot of the stuff that was there had gone bad, causing him to sigh. I'm going to have to do some grocery shopping, he said as he closed the fridge and shook his head. He then walked to the hidden door leading to the vault and unlocked it for walking down the flight of stairs and unlocking the second door and walking into the vault filled with priceless scrolls and weapons. At the corner of the vault was a desk. Naruto walked up to the desk and slicked his wrist, unsealing the documents he got from Gato onto the desk. He then organized them the way he wanted before exiting the vault and resealing it as he left. Naruto then made his way to his bedroom where he stripped off all of his clothes and wrapped himself in a towel before making his way to the private hot spring located behind the main house. Under the Leaf Village. Deep under the Leaf Village, a frail old man with a cane in his left hand and bandages wrapped around the right side of his head, completely covering his right eye, was standing in front of a young shinobi who was kneeling in front of him. If Naruto were here, he would recognize this shinobi as Sai from Team 7. I have something to report on Naruto Senju, Lord Danzo, Sai said as he looked to the old man, now identified as Danzo, with an impassive look on his face. Are the rumors true? Danzo asked as he stared down at his subordinate. Yes, he possesses the wood-release bloodline of the first Hokage, Sai said in an emotionless tone. I witnessed it with my own eyes, he added, causing the old man to nod. How proficient is he in using it? Danzo asked the boy. He appears to be extremely proficient in using it, he said, causing the old man to grip his cane tightly, hearing the reply. It was not the reply for which he was hoping. He was hoping Sai would tell him that the blonde was not that proficient with his bloodline, which would allow him to offer to help the boy learn to use his bloodline and in turn bring the boy over to his side, but that was not the case. He appears to be more proficient with it than his sensei, Sai added, causing Danzo to grit his teeth before he responded. That is to be expected, he said as he grits his teeth in frustration. He is the real deal while his sensei is just a copy, he added before letting out a small sigh. Now the boy has access to the Senju clan's extensive library along with all of the first Hokage's jutsu scrolls. His proficiency from here on will only get better, he said with frustration ever so present in his voice. What are your orders, Lord Danzo? Sai asked emotionlessly as he bowed his head. Leave the Senju to me, Danzo said to his subordinate. The third Hokage's teachings were probably ingrained into him since he was a baby by his grandmother, he said with a scowl. He may be beyond our grasp, but the Uchiha isn't, he added. Sasuke Uchiha has awakened his Sharingan, Sai reported, causing Danzo to nod in satisfaction. Good. He is coming along nicely, Danzo said while nodding. I should approach him soon, he said. Continue with your mission and continue to gather information on the Senju, Danzo ordered while looking down at Sai. We must know the extent of his abilities in case he needs to be eliminated, he added. As you wish, Lord Danzo, Sai said with a bow. Dismissed. Danzo said as he stamped his cane on the ground, causing Sai to vanish in a puff of smoke. Damn you, Hiruzen. Danzo thought to himself as he stared out into the darkness. First you are hiding the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, and now you hid a Senju who possesses the first Hokage's bloodline from me. Danzo thought angrily. In his mind, the third Hokage was playing him for a fool. That boy would have made the perfect weapon for the village, he thought while shaking his head and walking away. I will have my day, Hiruzen. I will have my day, he said as he walked away into the darkness. With Naruto, dressed in long black pants and a white t-shirt with the Senju clan's symbol on the back, Naruto put on his sandals and began making his way out of the house. After all the food in the fridge had gone bad, he decided he was going to eat out. Exiting the compound and locking the gates, Naruto began strolling down the street. The sun had already set, and the stars were out. The street was illuminated by streetlights and the Hidden Leaf's nightlife was in full swing. As he was walking, few people would recognize him and greet him, to which he returned their greetings. After walking for about 15 minutes, Naruto came to a halt in front of a ramen shop with the Ichiraku Ramen written on the front. Ramen, Naruto thought as he smiled and ate his lips before entering the ramen stand. Welcome, the old ramen chef said from behind the counter with a warm smile. What can I get for you? He asked as Naruto sat down on one of the stools. One large bowl of miso ramen, Naruto said in an excited tone to the ramen chef. One large miso ramen coming right up, the ramen chef said before he turned and looked further into the shop. Ayame. One large bowl of miso ramen, he shouted to someone in the back. Coming right up, Dad. A girl shouted back. 2 minutes later a large bowl of steaming hot ramen was in front of Naruto. Thanks for the food, Naruto shouted before he dug into his food. The moment the taste of ramen hit his palate his eyes went wide. Swallowing the mouthful of noodles, he turned to the ramen chef and his daughter and spoke with stars in his eyes. This is the best ramen I have ever eaten, he said with a jubilant look on his face. Haha, glad you like it, young man, the old man said with a warm smile while his daughter nodded. I'll have another bowl please, Naruto said while his mouth was filled with noodles. Chuckling at the blonde's enthusiasm, the ramen chef began preparing another bowl. At the end of it all, Naruto ate 5 bowls of ramen before finally stopping himself. His grandmother would probably kill him if she found out he ate any more. Paying the ramen chef, who he learned was named Tuki, he began making his way back home. Upon arriving back in the compound, Naruto went down to the basement where the library was located. Upon unlocking the seals and he entered the large library which he previously had his clones read everything that was in there, but there was still some stuff that bothered him. Making 10 shadow clones, Naruto turned to them and gave out orders. 5 of you go over there and read those scrolls about my great-great-grandfather's would release once more, he ordered to the first 5 clones before he turned to the second set. You 5 go find some books on advanced nature transformation techniques, he said, causing the clones to all nod and began moving their respected sections. The original Naruto then began walking through the library, getting a good look at everything for himself. When he got to the very end of the library, he saw a painting was hanging on the wall. This is an odd place for a painting, he thought to himself as he examined the painting. It was a painting of a raging whirlpool. Naruto had to admit, it was well painted. It was probably in the library a long time, but the colors were still vibrant and vivid. Looking closely at the painting, he could see some runes written into the image, causing his eyebrows to raise. Well, this is interesting, he said to himself. Reaching out and placing his palm on the painting, he channeled chakra into it, causing a sealing array to become visible. Examining it, he could see that it was a similar security seal to the one that was on the hidden door to the vault. Evaluating his hypothesis, he bit his thumb and smeared some blood over the seal before pulsing his chakra in a specific pattern. A second after that, a larger sealing formula appeared before a wooden door revealed itself. Opening the door and causing the lights to turn on automatically, Naruto saw an empty chamber with a stone slab in the center of the chamber. Narrowing his eyes and stepping into the room, Naruto could see ceiling ruins and kanji were written all along the floor, walls, and ceiling. All of them seemed to originate from or leading to the stone slab in the middle. Examining everything while moving closer to the stone, Naruto could not help but be impressed by everything. This is some advanced stuff, he thought while looking around. He understood some of what he was looking at, but there was still a lot that he did not fully understand. His knowledge of sealing jutsus he got from his godfather Jiraiya, who was a competent seals master but was still very lacking, especially when compared to the 4th Hokage and the Uzumaki clan. From what I can make out, this seems to be the master sealing matrix for the security seals around the compound, Naruto noted as he examined the seals further. It was an intricate and complex security seal made up of a combination of other seals that each serve a different function when it comes to the overall defense of the compound. There were blood seals to recognize Senju blood, but there was a separate seal spliced into the blood seal to allow non-Senju clan members to enter the compound by having their blood recorded into the seal. There were a few barrier seals linked to the blood seal that prevented anyone not part of the blood records from entering the compound. Not to mention the numerous lethal traps linked to each barrier seal designed to trigger if anyone tries to breach the compound or one of the barriers. Man, the Uzumaki clan sure were something, Naruto thought as he continued to examine the seals. No doubt this was set by Grandma Mito, he thought as he remembered hearing stories about the woman from his grandmother growing up. Hashirama Senju may have been feared as the god of shinobi, but his wife was a force to be reckoned with, especially when it came to fuinjutsu. Smiling slightly to himself, Naruto bit his thumb once more and smeared blood across the sealing formula before placing his right palm over it and pulsing his chakra in a specific pattern. After finishing with the last pulse, the seals in the entire chamber lit up, illuminating the room even brighter. After 2 seconds of glowing, Naruto felt a stinging pain from his right palm which was resting on the stone, causing him to wince slightly. The pain did not last long. After 5 seconds it went away, causing Naruto to remove his palm from the stone and look at it. When he looked down at the inside of his palm, he saw a smaller version of the sealing matrix in his palm, causing him to raise an eyebrow. Well, this is new, he said to himself as he stared at the small seal in his palm. As he was staring at it, the seal began to fade away as though it was being absorbed into his skin. After the seal vanished from his palm, his eyes widened in slight shock. This is, he trailed off as he felt control over the security seal around the entire compound. Master control of the security seal, he said with a smile as he realized that he no longer had to lock and lock the seals on the gate every time he left the compound. Now all he needs to do is lock it and he should be able to exit and enter without any risk. Smiling to himself, Naruto exited the chamber and resealed the door before making his way out of the library, leaving his lines in the to continue their research. He then made his way to his bedroom in order to get some sleep. Next day, it was around 7 in the morning, the sun was already up in the sky above the Hidden Leaf village. Standing in the kitchen of the main house of the Senju compound was Naruto, dressed in long black cargo pants and a black long-sleeved muscle t-shirt that clung to his body, showing off his well-toned muscles. He was drinking a cup of coffee, staring out into the backyard, planning his day and mulling over the information the clones gathered in the library last night. Thanks to him having 2 days off, he figured he should get some training done along with cleaning up the compound a bit. Finishing his coffee, Naruto exited the main house and stood in the main courtyard of the compound. Snapping his fingers, he caused a single shadow clone to appear in front of him. "I need you to go buy groceries and restock the kitchen," he said as he reached into his pocket and tossed his frog-shaped wallet to the clone. "You got it, boss," the clone said as it caught the wallet before disappearing in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves. Naruto then made the clone hand seal before he spoke. Shadow Clone Jutsu. he shouted, causing a large puff of smoke to appear in front of him. When the smoke cleared, 50 identical copies of Naruto were all standing there staring at the original. Flicking his wrist, Naruto activated the storage steel on his wrist, unsealing a medium-sized storage scroll. He then tossed the scroll into the air before holding up a half-ram seal, causing a puff of smoke to surround the scroll before 50 smaller scrolls rained down from the sky into the hands of each of the clones. Inside each of those scrolls are brushes with ink and sealing papers, he said impassively as he watched every clone cut a scroll. I want you all to practice some of the sealing techniques the other clones learned from the library, he commanded before pointing to one of the empty houses in the compound and spoke again. Use one of those houses to work if you want, he added. Sure thing, boss, the 50 clones said simultaneously before making their way to unoccupied houses. As that set of clones went out to do their jobs, Naruto once again held up the clone hand seal before shouting once more. Multi-shadow clone jutsu, he yelled as he put a bit more chakra into this one. There was a large puff of smoke in front of Naruto, far larger than the one previously. As the cloud of smoke disappeared, a large group of about 150 clones stood in front of the original Naruto. I want you all to clean up the compound, Naruto said loudly to the clones. Cut the grass, trim the hedges, uproot all of those dead flowers around the trees, and trim the trees. He ordered, causing the group clones to groan. Can't we hire someone to do this? One brave clone asked, causing Naruto's eyebrow to twitch slightly before he turned to the clone and snapped his finger, causing the clone to disappear in a puff of smoke. Anyone else got any complaints? He asked while eyeing each clone. Nope. One replied. None from me, another said while holding up its hands. I like doing hard labor, another said, amusing Naruto. Me too, chimed in another clone. All right, enough, Naruto shouted, silencing all of them. Get to work, he commanded, causing the clones to scatter. Sighing to himself while shaking his head, Naruto placed his hands in his pocket and began walking in the direction of the private training ground inside the compound. Similar to when he first visited the training ground on his first day in the village, Naruto was taken in the beautiful sights of the compound as he walked through it. Upon arrival at the large training ground, the blonde made his way to the center of the training ground before once again holding up the clone hand seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu, he shouted as he channeled way more chakra into the technique than before. There was a large puff of smoke that covered the entire training ground. When the cloud of smoke vanished, the entire training ground was filled with identical copies of Naruto. There had to be over 2,000 shadow clones in the training ground, all standing there looking at the original Naruto standing in the center. Listen up, Naruto shouted loudly, getting all of the clones' attention. I want you all to create a wooden pillar in front of you. He shouted, causing the clones to do as they were told. It did not take 5 seconds before the entire training ground was filled with over 2,000 wooden pillars about 10 feet tall and 2 feet wide. Our main goal over these next 2 days is to increase our affinity to both water and earth chakra natures. He shouted as he walked between a few clones and pillars. By the end of these 2 days, our control over the water and earth chakra natures should be equal to or greater than our control over the wind nature. Are we clear? He shouted, asked. Yes, boss, 2,000 clones shouted back, causing Naruto to smile. All right then, he said with a smirk. Half of you focus on water, while the other half focus on earth, he said as he made his way to one of the corners of the training ground. Each of the clones then placed their hands on their respected wooden pillar and began using their chakra to either try and soak the entire wood pillar or turn the pillar to dirt. As the clones were working and Naruto was weaving through each of them, they all suddenly stopped as the memory from one of the clones cleaning the compound registered in their heads. A few moments earlier, in front of the gates of the Senju compound, a single shinobi wearing an animal-style porcelain mask that resembled an eagle landed in front of the open gates and tried to walk into the compound. As he was about to enter the compound, the Anbu operative walked right into what would appear to be an invisible wall. What the? The eagle-masked Anbu said, asked in confusion before walking back up and reaching out with his hand touching the invisible barrier. A barrier of some kind, he noted in fascination. Something I can help you with. Came a voice from the other side of the barrier, knocking the Anbu out of his thought. Lord Senju, the Anbu said in surprise as he saw Naruto standing in front of him on the other side of the barrier holding some withered-up flowers in his hands. Lord Hokage has summoned the council. Your presence is requested, the Anbu informed, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. Well, I am just a shadow clone, the Naruto, in front of the Anbu said, surprising the man. I'll let the boss know though, he said before dispelling himself and dropping all of the dried up flowers before the eagle Anbu could say anything else. With Naruto present time, after receiving the clone's memory, Naruto sighed to himself as he turned to the large group of shadow clones in the training ground and saw all of them looking at him. You all continue with what you are doing. I'll go to the council meeting, he said, causing all of them to nod their head and return to their training. Naruto then held up a half-ram seal and disappeared in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves only to appear at the front gates in a similar fashion, surprising the Anbu operative. Where is the council chamber? He asked as he appeared. Without missing a beat, the Anbu agent replied. It is located in the basement of the building which the Hokage's office is, the eagle-masked Anbu replied. The session starts in 10 minutes, he added before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto utilized the body flicker technique once more to vanish from in front of the compound to in front of the building where the Hokage's office was in. Putting an impassive expression on his face, Naruto entered the building, only giving a slight nod to people who greeted him along the way. As he entered the building, he stood in the main lobby and looked around, trying to find a stairway or something that leads to the basement. As he was standing in the lobby looking around, the same eagle-masked Anbu agent landed on the ground beside him. Lord Senju, the Anbu said from beside Naruto. This way please, he said before he started walking towards a door located to the eastern side of the lobby. Following the Anbu agent, they walked through the door and down a flight of stairs into the basement of the building. The eagle-masked Anbu then led Naruto in front of two large, beautifully designed double doors and spoke. This is the council chambers, he said in an impassive voice. Everyone is already inside, he added. Thank you, Eagle, Naruto said as he turned to the two double doors. The Anbu agent nodded before disappearing from beside Naruto. Taking a deep breath, Naruto pushed open both doors and stepped into the council chambers. As he stepped into the chambers, he saw there were 3 long conference tables arranged in a U shape, with 2 of them laying vertical on either side of the chamber while one laid horizontal at the head of the other 2. There was a sizable gap between the 2 vertical tables where someone who is called before the council would stand. Seated at the table on the left were the Shinobi Council, most of whom were clan heads like Naruto, while on the table to the right sat the members of the Civilian Council. They were mostly rich merchants and business owners in the Leaf Village. Sitting at the horizontal table which connected the other 2 by himself was the Hokage. He was sitting in the center of the table in a large throne-like chair with a large red banner hanging from the wall directly behind him with the kanji for fire written on it. Behind the Hokage, sitting on either side of him, were his 2 advisors who also happened to be his former teammates. They were sitting in front of 2 smaller desks not that far from the Hokage. Welcome, Naruto, the Hokage greeted warmly while making his pipe, knocking the blonde out of his examination. I hope I'm not late, Naruto said after seeing he was clearly the last to arrive. Not at all, my boy, the Hokage said with a wave of his hand. You still have a few minutes to spare, he added, causing Naruto to nod his head before he started walking towards the shinobi side of the council, surprising the civilians along with the clan heads. The third Hokage just looked out with an amused expression on his face, not saying anything. As Naruto walked around the table, he observed everyone and everything and made mental notes in his head. The first thing he noticed was that behind the headrest of every chair was the crest for which clan they belonged to. Along with having their clan's crest engraved into the wood of their seat, they each had a metal nameplate directly in front of them on the desk with their names on it. The first person Naruto came upon was sitting at the very last seat at the table. It was someone he was somewhat similar with, and that was the Jonin sensei of Team 10, Asuma Sarutobi. Due to his father being Hokage, he had to take up the seat on the council. Naruto smiled slightly and nodded in the direction of the Jonin sensei of Team 10, to which he responded with a nod of his own. The immediate seat to the left of Asuma sat the only female member of the Shinobi Council, Tsume Inuzuka. She was the head of the Inuzuka clan. The Inuzuka clan were most famous for their use of ninja hounds as fighting companions and are easily identified by the distinctive red fang markings on their cheeks. Similar to how he greeted Asuma, Naruto gave a slight nod in the direction of the woman, to which she grinned back at him. Sitting next to Tsume was the head of the Aburame clan, Shibi Aburame. The Aburame clan was all famous for having insects residing inside of their bodies. The thing that Naruto found absolutely fascinating about the Aburame clan was the variety of ways the clan has found to utilize the insects in combat. The insects can be poisonous, used as trackers, they can consume your enemy's chakra, or even infest your enemy's body to kill them. The versatility of the insects was absolutely fascinating to Naruto. Naruto gave him a slight nod just like he did the others as he continued walking to his seat. The person sitting next to Shibi was the head of the Yamanaka clan, Inoichi Yamanaka. Along with being the head of the Yamanaka clan, he was also the head of the analysis team in the village's intelligence division, as well as one-third of the famous Ino Shikacho formation. Naruto had heard that his family had a flower shop in the village. Maybe I should check out their shop to find some flowers to plant around the compound, he thought as he nodded and walked by the man. The next person he came across was another member of the Ino Shikacho formation. It was the head of the Akamichi clan, Choza Akamichi. The Akamichi clan were famous for using techniques that revolve around the manipulation of their body weight and size through the use of yang release. Naruto had heard from his grandmother that it was an absolute taboo to call a member of the Akamichi clan fat. According to her, it is considered a death sentence. Similar to other clan heads he walked past, Naruto nodded and smiled at the man, to which he returned the gesture. Sitting next to Choza was a man who, simply judging from his appearance alone, Naruto could tell who he was and which clan he was the head of. That man was Hiyashi Hyuga, the current head of the Hyuga clan. There was no mistaking the appearance of a member of the Hyuga clan. They all had long black hair and pale white eyes, along with always having an arrogant, conceited look on their faces. The Hyuga clan members were similar to the Uchiha, they all thought they were better than the rest because of their eyes. Looking at the man, Naruto could see the head of the Hyuga clan looked back at him with an impassive look on his face before he simply closed his eyes and turned away as if Naruto were not worth his time. The blonde-haired Senju simply kept an impassive look on his face and walked past the chair of the arrogant man without even bothering to acknowledging him. To the left of Hiyashi was a man laying head down on the table with his eyes closed as though he was sleeping, which caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow. That man was none other than the final member of the Ino Shikacho formation, Shikaku Nara, the head of the Nara clan and the Jonin commander of the Hidden Leaf village. His position as the Jonin commander was why he was seated this far up the table. Sensing Naruto was walking past him, Shikaku opened one of his eyes and stared at the blonde for a few seconds before closing it back and muttering under his breath. Troublesome, he muttered, causing Naruto to chuckle slightly as he walked past. Next to Shikaku was an empty chair with the symbol of the Uchiha clan on the back. There was no sitting head of the clan due to the fact that the only living members of the clan were Sasuke and his brother Itachi, and only one of them was still loyal to the leaf. Sasuke did not have the advantage that Naruto had by having his grandmother appoint him acting head of the clan. Before the massacre, the person next in line for the position of clan head was Itachi, but he was now a missing ninja and Sasuke is forced to wait until he becomes a Chunin. Sigh to himself while shaking his head, Naruto walked past the empty chair to the next seat, which was the seat of the Senju clan. As he got there, however, he narrowed his eyes dangerously as he stared at a frail old man with bandages covering the right side of his face sitting in the seat. "Excuse me, but I do believe you are in my seat," Naruto said in a cold voice as he stared down at the old man. "Unless there is another Senju in the village I am unaware of," he added. The room was dead silent, no one uttered a word. They all simply watched on to see how the situation would play out. "I am the proxy in the council for the Senju clan," the old man replied proudly. "I don't recall my grandmother mentioning anything about her appointing a proxy to vote on behalf of the clan," Naruto stated as he continued to stare at the man who had yet to even look in his direction. "Tobarama Senju was my teacher, and besides, the council is no place for a brat like you," the man said in a slightly irritated tone. "I could care less as to who your teacher was," Naruto stated in a cold voice as he was starting to get angry. "You do not have Senju blood flowing through your veins, so you hold no authority to vote on behalf of the Senju clan," he told the old man. "So, I am going to have to ask you to vacate the seat," he said in an unfriendly tone. "And if I refuse to get up?" the old man asked as he turned and looked at Naruto with one eye, causing the blonde to narrow his eyes before he spoke in a threatening tone. "Then I'll just have to use force," Naruto said lowly before releasing the might of his chakra. Dense chakra exploded from Naruto, causing the ground beneath his feet to break under the pressure and the cracks to form on the four walls of the council chambers. The chakra was so dense that it became visible in a green outline around Naruto, causing everyone's eyes in the room to be as wide as dinner plates. The shockwave from Naruto releasing his chakra knocked all the civilians off their chairs while causing the clan heads to sweat slightly. Shikaku Nara was now wide awake, staring at Naruto with a shocked expression on his face, which was mirrored by all the other clan heads. Even the Hokage was surprised by Naruto's power. He had known the blonde was powerful, but he had no idea he was already this powerful. His chakra is so dense. The clan heads all thought as they were slightly struggling under the pressure Naruto was exerting. The Hokage, his two advisors, and the old man currently sitting in the Senju clan's seat all had different thoughts, however. "It's like Lord Hashirama's chakra," they all thought as the strong dense chakra reminded them of the first Hokage. While everyone was having their own thoughts, Naruto continued to stare at the old man before taking one step in his direction. As his foot made that one step, even more chakra exploded out from Naruto, surprising everyone once more. The old man widens his eyes slightly before a tremendous amount of pain struck his right arm, which was hidden away in his robe. "Ah!" the old man screamed while clutching his right arm, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in confusion for a split second. Before anyone could question what was happening to the old man, two Anbu agents wearing coats dropped down behind Naruto with their swords drawn and stabbed it through Naruto's chest, causing all the clan heads to spring to their feet along with the Hokage. Looking down at his chest and seeing two short swords sticking out of him, Naruto kept an impassive look on his face before slowly turning his head to the side and staring at his two attackers with a cold expression on his face. "It takes more than that to kill me," he said calmly, surprising the two Anbu members. Before they could react, Naruto spun around and grabbed both of their heads in each of his hands. With a tight grip on both of their heads, Naruto slammed both of their head into the wall behind them with such force it shook the entire building and crushed the two Anbu's head in the process to the point where blood and brain matter splattered on the wall, killing them. The two now headless corpses dropped to the ground before Naruto removed his bloodied hand from the wall and turned back around to face everyone. He then reaches up behind him with both hands and grabbed the two swords which were still stuck in his chest and pulled them out before dropping them beside the two corpses. Everyone's eyes widened at how nonchalant Naruto was about what should be a fatal wound. Through the rips in his shirt, everyone could see the wounds healing themselves at a rapid pace, surprising them even more. I am not going to tell you to get up again, old man, Naruto said dangerously as he began walking in the direction of the old man with his chakra still flaring. The old man stared at Naruto with one eye while clutching his right hand in pain. I did not think he was this powerful. The old man thought as he tries to battle through the pain. Danzo, Naruto was appointed acting head of the Senju clan by Tsunade until she returns. The Hokage said, deciding to speak up before things get more out of hand. At first, he had thought this would all be very amusing to see how Naruto handles Danzo, but he never imagined it would turn out like this. Growling to himself, the old man now named Danzo got up and walked over in the direction of the two elders. And you and I are going to have words about that little organization that you were supposed to disband. The Hokage added strongly. Naruto then got his chakra under control and the once unimaginable pressure vanished from the room, causing everyone to relax. As his chakra was back under control, Naruto noticed the pain in Danzo's right arm seemed to vanish as well. Interesting, he thought as he stared at the now pain-free old man before making him over and sitting down at the council table in the seat for the Senju clan. Anbu, get rid of those bodies. The Hokage ordered before sitting back down as two Anbu agents dropped down and took the bodies away. Everyone in the council soon retook their seats and stared at Naruto in awe. How are you not dead? One civilian council member blurted out the question that was on everyone's mind. According to my grandmother, her grandfather possessed a considerable regenerative ability that rivaled if not surpassed those of Jinchurikis, he said as he looked at the two rips in his shirts. I seem to also have this ability, he added with a grin, surprising the Hokage and his advisors along with everyone else inside the council. Aw man, I really like this shirt, Naruto complained as he rubbed his fingers across the two rips. Ha ha ha, I like this kid, Sum suddenly said while laughing. He's going to make these meetings fun, she added, causing Naruto to grin and give her two thumbs up before replying. Ha ha ha. You can count on me, he said with a wide grin. Troublesome, Shikaku said before laying his head back down on the desk. Let's get this meeting started, the Hokage said with a sigh before taking a long drag from his pipe and blew out a large billow of smoke before he reached into his robe and pulled out a small storage scroll, and tossed it up into the air before activating the storage seal, causing a puff of smoke to surround the scroll before a set of papers fell down in front of each council members. Everyone then sat at attention with a serious look on their faces as they looked through the papers, except for Shikaku, who still had his head on the desk. You are the one who summoned the council, Lord Hokage, the head of the civilian council said. The head of the civilian side of the council was a woman named Mebuki Haruno. Along with being the head of the civilian council, she is Sakura's mother. She got to her position on the council due to her and her husband owning a few buildings in the commercial district which they rent out to business owners. What was the reason for today's summons? She asked respectfully. Well, in about 5 months' time the Chunin exams will be held here in the Hidden Leaf Village, the third Hokage informed, causing the civilian side of the council to perk up a bit. So, we need to start making preparations, he added. The Chunin exams are always great for business, a merchant from the civilian side said while the other nodded in agreement. Have you decided who the head proctors are going to be? Inoichi asked as he turned and looked at the Hokage. No, not as yet, the old man said before turning his attention to Shikaku. Shikaku and I will meet later and decide on that, he said, causing the Nara clan head to groan. Inoichi, start making preparations in the barrier and sensory division to handle the heavy influx of people, the Hokage said as he turned to the Yamanaka clan's head. Yes, Lord Third, the blonde-haired man replied with a nod. Is the arena in order? Choza asked as he read the papers. Some minor repairs need to be made to some seats and rails but nothing major, one of the Hokage's advisors said from behind the Hokage. What is the maximum capacity of spectators the arena can hold? Naruto suddenly asked while reading the papers. 25,000, replied the old woman sitting behind the Hokage. Why? She asked. You are going to need more seats, Naruto stated, puzzling everyone. Why is that, Lord Senju? A civilian asked, causing Naruto to look up from the papers. Well, this year the last Uchiha will be competing, a lot of people are going to come to see that, he said, causing everyone to nod, understanding his logic. But also, by that time, the news would have reached all the other villages if it has not already of a Senju possessing the first Hokage's bloodline appeared in the Leaf Village and will be competing in this year's Chunin exams, he added with a smirk. People are going to come from far and wide to see that, he said with a chuckle, causing everyone to realize why he suggested the need for more seats. He is right, Shikaku said in a lethargic tone as he raised his head up. The fact that the last two male heirs to the founding clans of the village are going to be competing, plus the fact that both heirs passing two incredibly strong bloodlines, with one of them not being seen by the world for a few decades now. People are going to want to see these legendary powers with their own eyes, he said in a serious voice as he leaned back in his chair. Not to mention the villages that are going to show up in order to see if either two is a possible threat to them, he added, causing everyone to become even more serious. Either way, the entire situation is troublesome, he said with a yawn, causing everyone to sweat drop. Sounds exciting, Naruto said with an excited look on his face, causing the Hokage to chuckle and shake his head. Even if we decide to increase the spectator capacity of the arena, will it be done in time for the exams? Sum asked a valid question, causing everyone to ponder upon it. I would say so, Naruto said with a thoughtful expression on his face. If we hire the bridge builder Tsunade from the land of waves, he could possibly do it, he suggested. In 5 months' time, Shibi asked in a skeptical tone. Yeah, I mean, he built an impressive bridge connecting the land of waves and the land of fire in about 3 to 4 months, Naruto said while nodding. This should be easier than a bridge, he added with a chuckle. Plus, he should give us a discount after he saved his country and whatnot, Naruto said while looking at the Hokage. Saved his country? Hiyashi asked, speaking for the first time. Long story short, a C rank mission turned into an A- rank mission due to the involvement of a few missing ninjas. We killed the missing ninjas and the guy who hired said ninjas, freeing the land of waves from oppression, Naruto summarized, causing everyone's mouth to hang open. How does a C rank mission become an A- rank mission? Choza asked with a bewildered expression on his face. What kind of twisted luck if that? He asked, causing the Hokage to chuckle while Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders. Which reminds me, Naruto said as he narrowed his eyes and turned to the third Hokage. We are going to need an explanation as to why Team 7 was given a C rank mission in the first place only after being genin for 1 week, he said, causing the Shinobi Council to narrow their eyes while a few civilian council members began to squirm slightly. An investigation is currently being conducted, the Hokage informed. Once it is completed, another council session will be held to go over the results, he said, causing Naruto to nod along with the Shinobi Council. Now, are there any objections to the upgrades to the stadium? He asked as he looked around. No one voiced any concerns, so the Hokage made a note on his set of papers. If we are going to have the new spectator stands built, I can add some barrier seals around the arena, that way the spectators are not affected by anything going on during a match, Naruto said, surprising the shinobi once more. You know how to make seals? Hiyashi asked with a surprised look on his face, to which Naruto simply nodded. I guess you could say I am a seals master, he said, trying to be modest. That is a great idea, Naruto, the Hokage said with a smile. Spectators' safety was always an issue we had to worry about. If you can make these barriers around the stadium to protect them, then that would be appreciated, he said as he stared at the blonde. Danzo, who was standing behind the two advisors, clenched his cane in his left hand and narrowed his eyes at Naruto. He is too young to be this powerful already, the old war hawk thought to himself as he stared at Naruto. In the brief time he has been in the council, he is already winning over the favor of the Shinobi Council and even some of the civilians. He thought angrily. He must be eliminated before he becomes more powerful or gains more influence, he thought as he began to scheme in his head. Unaware of the thoughts of the old war hawk, the rest of the council meeting continued discussing the plans and budget for the upcoming Chunin exams. Naruto had suggested a lot of ideas to the council, a lot of which both sides liked and found interesting. For his first council meeting, Naruto was doing an excellent job of gaining influence with both sides of the council. The third Hokage had to admit, he was quite impressed. After 2 hours of planning everything out, the council session finally came to an end. Okay, that is it for this session. The Hokage said, calling the session to a halt. You're all dismissed, except for you, Danzo. He said, causing everyone to look off behind him at the old man who had been standing the entire time. As everyone was exiting the chamber, they could all hear the Hokage yell the Danzo. I thought I told you to disband that little organization 6 years ago. They all heard the Hokage yell as they exited the chamber before the door shut behind them. 6 years ago, Naruto thought to himself, thinking back to what notable events happened 6 years ago. His grandmother had talked about Danzo and his organization, the Root. Even though they engaged in some shady dealings, the Hokage still kept them around. It would have to be something big that happened 6 years ago that would push the third Hokage to force Danzo to disband his organization. The only notable event that happened 6 years ago was the Uchiha massacre, he thought with a puzzled expression on his face as he walked up the stairs back to the main lobby. Did Danzo play a part in the Uchiha massacre? He asked himself before shaking the thoughts from his head as he realized he reached the main lobby. Holding up the half-ram seal, Naruto disappeared from the lobby in a swirl of cherry blossom leaves and reappearing back in the private training grounds of the Senju compound. When he arrived, he saw his clones were all still hard at work training. Summoning his own wooden pillar, he joined in the training with them. 2 days later, after 2 days off, Naruto was currently standing in the training ground 11 waiting for his sensei so they could get back to work. His 2 days of training had been extremely productive. He had managed to increase his affinity to both water and earth chakra natures. His knowledge in seals had increased as well after his clones had practiced quite a bit over the past 2 days. Even though he had not used the 2 days to exactly rest, he was feeling incredibly refreshed. You look ready to go, came the voice of Yamato from behind Naruto, surprising the blonde. He was so engrossed in thought that he had not sensed the man appearing in the training ground. You bet, Naruto said as he gave his sensei a thumbs up. Well then, let's go get a mission to start the day, Yamato said before the two of them disappeared from the training in their own unique version of the body flicker technique.